Hello, I'm just Stanley with Stanley Handcrafted, and today we're going to be going over how to make soy candles, specifically GB or Golden Brand 464. Now 464 is probably the most widely used soy wax for doing candles. It's a very good wax. It comes in a flake form, so it's real easy to measure out. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to tell you exactly what to get. Okay, so what you're going to need is obviously your wax. You're going to want to pick the jars that you're going to want to go with. I've got two different ones here, but we're only going to use this one right now. This is an 8-ounce jelly jar. This is very widely used. You can get it at pretty much any candle supplier website. We get ours at candlescience.com. I'll post the links down below. And then you're going to want to pick out a wick. You can see in this one I've got a wooden wick, which is a very good option. I'll post the link to those down below. The wick that I use in my 8-ounce candle jar is an HTP wick, which is a really good wick. It seems to burn nice and strong. You don't get any curling or soot. This one is an HTP 104. You can go down. I believe the next one down is a 93. Both of them work well in this jar. The reason I go with this one is because it puts off a little bit bigger flame. So when the candle burns, you actually get a little stronger scent from it, especially with soy, because soy tends to produce a little bit lower of a hot throw. So when you burn it, I like them to burn a little bit hotter so the scent comes off the candle just a little bit more. And then with this candle today, we're going to be doing Candle Science's cinnamon buns, or cinnamon roll, whatever you want to call it. When you pick a fragrance for your soy candles, you want to make sure that you get one that is soy approved or tested with soy, because not a lot of scents work well in soy. A lot of the lighter scents, like lemons or some of the lighter florals, don't really work well in soy. So you want to go to the website. A lot of them, like Candle Science, I believe some of the other ones also have a rating system, and they will tell you which fragrances work best in soy. Cinnamon Buns is a nice, very strong fragrance, and it works well in soy, so we're going to go ahead and use this one just for demo purposes. So for this, you're going to need your wax, you're going to need a melting pitcher, something to stir the wax with, your jars, your wick, your lids, any thermometer. You don't need a real precise thermometer. We're looking at ballpark temperatures here. Nothing's going to be exact. I picked this one up from Ace Hardware. It's a barbecue thermometer. It just fits really well inside this jar, which is why I grabbed it. So any thermometer, you can use a candy thermometer. Those are very good. And then something to put the fragrance in. You definitely want to get something that's rated, because this fragrance oil will burn and melt regular plastic, so you want to get something that's rated to hold this. Tupperware containers work perfect. You definitely don't want to use like a red Solo cup or paper cups, because it will just eat right through and you'll have fragrance all over your counter. And then you're obviously going to need a scale to weigh everything out. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this going. I'm going to weigh out, we're just doing 2 pounds of wax, because we're going to do 6 candles. In the 8-ounce jelly jar, 1 pound of wax will make 3 of the 8-ounce jelly jars. This wax is probably one of the easiest to work with, as far as just one of the easiest to work with in general, because of the flake form. You can weigh out exactly what you need. It's not very messy at all. I mean, you get a little bit on your hands, but it brushes right off. Whereas some of the other waxes are extremely gooey and sticky. Now I'm at 32 ounces right now, but I usually add a little bit more just to make sure every single candle. So I usually go to about 34. So I'm at 34 ounces right now. And the only reason I do that is just not to over pour, but just to make sure every candle, because some waxes do shrink. This one is a non-shrinking soy, so the 32 ounces should fit perfect into the 6 jars, but I give it a little bit more just in case the wax melts down a little bit. Okay, so I've got everything weighed out. We're going to go ahead and put it on the stove. Okay, we've got the wax weighed out right here, and I'm going to try to film this one-handed since I don't have my daughter or my son here to help me. So I've got the wax right here. We're going to go ahead and drop this into a double broiler method. This is probably the best way to do this. You can put the wax directly on the burner. I definitely don't recommend doing it that way, just because you can't regulate the heat and the melting as well as a double broiler. If you put it directly on the burner itself, you can actually burn or scorch the wax. So I'm going to put that about a number 6 out of 10, so medium-high heat. And then for this one, we're gonna go ahead and just let that melt down. We're gonna let that get to probably about 180 degrees or 82 degrees Celsius, depending on where you are. Right around 180 degrees, the melt point of soy is right around 120, so it'll start to melt just before that. You usually want it to get up to a higher temperature just so that the wax can fully open up. Okay, while the wax is melting, we're gonna go ahead and place these wicks. Just gonna go ahead and drop your wicks down into the jar. And to adhere the wicks to the bottom of the jar, you want to use a hot glue gun or some wick tabs. You definitely don't want to have the wick. There are a couple videos out there where they just kind of drop them in. That's not a good idea, because as the wick gets burnt down all the way to the bottom, the very last probably inch of the wax is going to be fully melted. And if your wick isn't securely fastened to the bottom of the jar, the wick is going to float around. And if you're not watching your candle carefully, you can get that wick to go clear over to the side, and it'll burn all the way up the side of the glass, and it can become a very dangerous fire hazard. So we're going to use a hot glue gun. And the way that I put my wicks in, I've got just like a ballpoint pen, and just take the actual pin components out, slide the wick through there so that you can place it. Okay, so we're going to put a pretty good sized portion of glue on the bottom of that. You want it to stick pretty good. And you don't want to press too hard, just give it a nice little push so that the glue spreads but not too thin. You want a good size amount of glue at the bottom of that so that it continues to stick even when the wax gets fully melted at the bottom. If you don't do that, I've spread some of the wicks really thin before, and as the wax starts to heat up, it'll actually melt that glue and then it'll start to slide. So I just put it in there gently, let the glue spread just a little bit. Wick tabs are even easier. They're just double-sided stickers that you put on the bottom of these, and then you just drop them right in. And that's it. As soon as that glue dries here in about 2-3 minutes, well, it's dry right now, but I want to give it a couple minutes before we put the wick tabs to hold those wicks in place. And what I like to use, I started out using popsicle sticks. You can use anything to place that. Some people wrap them around chopsticks and leave them in there, pencils, anything like that. Popsicle sticks with a hole drilled through the middle. But as you get going, these right here are actually really nice. You can center it perfectly, and then it just kind of pops right into place, and it'll hold it right there in the middle. All right, we're gonna go ahead and measure out our fragrance oil. I didn't say it before, but 464 holds about 12% fragrance. So we're gonna be looking at, we're doing 1 pound today, so 1 pound or 45 kilograms will hold about 2 ounces of fragrance or 59 milliliters. But we're going to go ahead and double that. Okay, so the wax is fully melted now. And you can see right here, that's right at 180 degrees. Now, if your wax melts before 180 degrees, you can go ahead and pull it off. Like I said before, it's not an exact temperature. Just, we want the wax fully melted. So if it's fully melted at 175, go ahead and pull it off the stove. So we're gonna go ahead and move this to the counter. Okay, so the wax is fully melted. I pulled it off. It just happened to be right at 180 degrees or 82 degrees Celsius. Like I said before, if it melts before that, go ahead and pull it off. We just want the wax fully melted. Also, if you're going to add color to your candles, you can add the color. Usually dye blocks or color blocks are the best way to go. Those are that's the best way I've found to color candles. Just because you can shave off, it comes, oh, kitty here. It looks like a crayon. Gosh, I gotta help her now. It looks like a crayon, and you can shave off little shavings and then get the desired color that you want. I tend to add my color at the end when it's fully melted, just so that I don't want the color to hide the wax that's still melting. You can add the color whenever you want to. So if you want to put it in when the wax is still in a solid form, you can go ahead and do that as well. I wait till the very end when it's fully melted so that I know the wax is fully melted. Right now, soy is one of those waxes, it takes a long time to cool down. A lot of people will tell you, other videos on YouTube will tell you to go ahead and add your fragrance now. You can add your fragrance now, but since soy takes so long to cool, and I have another video that shows that, it takes about an hour before it starts to go back to a solid form. The problem with that is if I add my fragrance at 180 or 82 degrees Celsius, if I add my fragrance too high, and it's going to start to get to a solidified form probably around 125 degrees or a little over an hour. So that fragrance is just going to be sitting in the wax, burning off for a solid hour. So that's a lot of fragrance loss. So I tend to add my fragrance right around 145 degrees Fahrenheit or 62 degrees Celsius, sometimes a little bit lower than that. I like to add my fragrance. I've been doing this for a long time, so I can see when the wax is starting to go. You can see it go from clear to a little bit of milky, and I'll try to get the camera to show that. Just as it starts to go a little murky or milky with the coloring, that's when I add my fragrance. And the only reason that you want to add the fragrance when the wax is still fully melted is so that the fragrance and the wax fully binds together. And as it starts to solidify, it's not going to bind as well. So right around 145 degrees Fahrenheit or 62 degrees Celsius is a good temperature. It's still a little high. You can add lower than that, but that's a good temperature, and you're not going to waste a good 45 minutes to an hour of the fragrance just burning off in that wax. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let this cool down, and we'll watch that. All right, so the wax is right about 130 degrees Fahrenheit or 54 degrees Celsius. You can see that it's still fully melted, and we're going to go ahead and add our fragrance oil. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take the thermometer out. It's at the temperature that we want. And then I'm going to go ahead, and then we're going to go ahead and add the fragrance oil. And as soon as you add the fragrance oil, it's going to drop the temperature down probably another 5 degrees. And you're just going to go ahead and stir it for a minute or two just to make sure that the oil and the wax kind of fully bind itself to each other. And stirring for about 2 minutes there, and we're just going to go ahead and start pouring these into the jars. And with the wax at this melt point, you really don't need to worry about pouring too fast or too slow. It's not going to make any difference at all because the wax is still fully melted. If you're pouring at a slush form or when it's a little bit more solidified, you want to pour it a little bit slower. And that's just to avoid any air bubbles that can kind of come in there. I don't ever pour that low, so it's not a problem. And then we'll just go ahead and even these out. Okay, so that's it. I poured these, it's 4:43 right now. I'm gonna do a time lapse on these. We poured those, I don't know, the temperature was probably around 125 degrees. I pour my candles right after I add the fragrance. I don't let it cool down anymore. When you put it into the jars, it's gonna start cooling even quicker because it's got less wax to cool at one time. We're gonna go ahead and set a time lapse, and then once these fully solidify, we'll go ahead and cut the wicks and we'll go from there. All right, so that's pretty much it. You can see from the time lapse, it took probably about 45 or 50 minutes for it to get back to a solid form. With soy, you're gonna wanna let these cure for about probably, I don't know, there's a big debate on how long you let soy cure for. I've let them cure for 3 to 4 weeks, and I've let them cure for 3 to 4 days, and I haven't noticed a huge difference in burning. So I let soy go for about 5 to 7 days just to give it a good cure, let it really solidify. And then once you're done with the curing, actually, as soon as these are done, you can actually take these tops off. They're still a little bit soft, so I'm not going to do them right now. But you'll pop these out, cut the wicks to about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit. I leave my wicks just a little bit longer than the typical 1/4 inch, just to make sure that the first burn you get a good wide melt pool and it goes to the outer edges of the glass. After that, you're going to want to trim the wick after each burn down to 1/4 of an inch and then relight. The other thing you want to pay attention to as these cure over the next couple days is to make sure that the tops stay nice and flat. This one right here, you'll notice it has a little bit of a dip. The good thing with this soy right here is it doesn't shrink too much. If you watch the 6006 video, that wax really expands and shrinks, so you get a lot of sinkholes in a wax like that. You don't get too much as far as dipping or sinkholes with the soy, but you will get a little bit of like a frosting top, to where like when you frost a cake, it starts to harden and crack a little in spots so it looks like frosting. If you do get that, just run a heat gun over the top of these, and I'll show that as well, and it'll smooth those tops right out. So that's pretty much it for how to make soy candles. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe for more. We've got a lot more videos coming up in the very near future. I've got another wax that I just got in, so we'll be doing a video on that one very soon. And then of course you can find us at StanleyHandcrafted.com, Stanley Handcrafted, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you.